And it's actually a lot easier because you don't have to expend a lot of your space in your home for storage, because board service entails a lot of reading, and in the past, when I first came on, a lot of paperwork. I mean, like I had to clear a section of my office at home for the big filing cabinet, and a lot of that is now being electronically stored. I want to say, first of all, though, this is a first time we've ever done this Leadership Academy, and so we're so happy at the response. We had 14 people sign up, and then we have two new board members, so a total of 16 people in your cohort, which is fabulous, and it really warms my heart that there's this much commitment towards public service and support of our schools. I wanted to introduce Dave Donnelly. He's one of our newly elected board members who will be certified tomorrow evening and sworn in next Monday. And we have another, Dave and I have known each other, I think it was another life. It was definitely another century for a long time, so it'll be fun to be working with him in another capacity now. And we have another board member, I guess it's relatively official now, even though the election has to be certified, and that is Andy Holloman. And he might not be able to join us until a little later today. So today's agenda, we're going to do this for the first hour, and then you're going to be moving to different tables. It's what I call speed dating. You're going to be meeting the administration and having an opportunity to do a lot of motion, movement in and asking questions. And then you'll be doing a tour of this actual ASD education facility. Just so you understand, you have this acronyms and terms book dictionary that we produced when I was policy communications chair a couple years ago, because I know I was always stymied with not knowing what an acronym was, even though I had been in the education milieu for decades. It was often, and here he is, speak of not the devil, the angel. I still didn't know things, and so and having been a former world language teacher, I'm really purposely trying to help people understand what we're talking about. So Andy Holloman will be also certified tomorrow evening and sworn in, and will be our other new board member this year. Okay. So first of all, for this Leadership Academy, as I said, this is a brand new thing. In 2016, in August, I believe it was, August and December, we had two mini forums, I would call. They were entitled, So You Want to Serve on the Anchorage School Board, and some of you participated in those. If you did not participate in those, and you haven't seen this document on the ASD website, you might want to take one. We'll be covering a lot of this information, but more in depth. Plus, there's further information, even on suggestions on how to get elected, if that is what you are interested in doing in the future. It's not the gospel of school board service. It's my book. If I were one of the four apostles, it's my book. And so I wrote this as part of a class I was doing last summer and decided to share it with people, because this didn't exist when I had the idea to run for school board. And so I figured, why should everybody have to reinvent the wheel? So if you haven't had one of these, you're more than welcome to take one. If you would like to tweak or have suggestions on changes in this, because you have had some electoral experience, I'd more than welcome. This is a living document, and you can make changes. I'd also like to welcome our third board member, seated board member, who just arrived. This is Kathleen Plummer, who's our treasurer of our board. So, as I said, this is the first time we've done this academy. The intent is to have trainings at least once a month for the next 12 months. In some cases, they're webinars, which you can listen to live when they happen, and that gives you an opportunity to ask questions, or you can store and listen to when it meets your convenience or your schedule. We are planning to offer a graduation certificate for anyone who completes this academy in the next year, and to do that, though, we're going to have some standards, as we do for our district too. I think you're all aware we have a standard of 90% attendance for our students is our goal. Obviously, we would accept 100% too, but 90% is a minimum. And so that's going to be the standard to get a graduation certificate here. You do have 3 opportunities, 3 times, where you can go back and listen to the audio recording, which I'm verifying that we have going now. Okay, it's running right now. Perfect. Those will be stored on the school board website, so you can listen to them to make up 3 times. But the rest of those, we would like your physical presence if indeed you want to try for the graduation certificate. If you say that's impossible, I can only occasionally come, you're more than welcome even if you haven't come every time. Because each time, hopefully, there will be some things that you learn and expand your understanding of the Anchorage School District. Let's see, so everyone has an agenda, you have these. What we're going to start then with is this PowerPoint. I found this in my files, and I remember it was good enough that I kept it. And this is produced again by the Alaska Association of School Boards. And they presented this at a conference in the fall, November of 2015. And just kind of an overview as we move into this. Many of the things in this PowerPoint you're going to learn about more in depth as we move through this academy through the year. But again, this is an overview. So, right, there you go. Okay, I can learn.
Where'd you go to get to this?
I found this in my files.
Oh,
this
no,
was
no. So it's not.
It's not on there right now. Okay. So this was a workshop I attended in 2015. So there's 4 major items of governance that a school board does, as you can see. We hire and evaluate our superintendent, and this is our segue now where I'm going to introduce our superintendent. This is Dr. Dina Bishop. She's the same woman who we hired last year as Dr. Dina Paramo. Name change, same person. And if I may be so bold as to say a personal joke about how you upped your uncle. Should I share that? She has an uncle who's a Catholic bishop. And I said or Catholic priest, not a bishop. And I always tell her she one-upped her uncle because she became a bishop. So the fast track. Yeah, the fast track. So she, in this presentation for AASB, says she is our only employee. That's actually not accurate for the Anchorage School District. The way we wrote our policy is Katie Grant is actually our other employee. We have 2, and those are the employees that the school board directs and evaluates. And Katie Grant, if you have not had an opportunity to meet her, she walks on water for our board. Without her, I don't think we would be able to function much at all. So make sure you give her a big hand. Okay, and we also set and approve the district budget. We adopt and review curriculum, and we develop and adopt policies to govern. And we'll be talking a lot about policies in the future. To be a board member entails that you need to be prepared, and that's reading all materials before the meeting, not when you're seated up at the dais and suddenly going, oh geez, we're going to have to vote on this. Okay, jot down notes to things that you don't understand, ask questions through the board president or the superintendent, and then listen. I often state when I got on the board, I felt in that my first term, I felt like I earned another master's degree in the amount that I read and learned and discussed, and I definitely did the seat time. So you'll learn a lot. Be prepared, learn how the meeting works. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Meet with your board president and superintendent prior to their first meeting. Our 2 gentlemen who are going to be sworn in, I've already sent them materials to start reading, and this is an opportunity for them to learn also before that first meeting. My own experience, I was seated on the board. I was the year where they had a little foul up with the number of ballots, and they had a bunch of challenges, and we had to wait 6 weeks to be seated. So I was seated on June 11th, and I wasn't on the board 10 minutes when I had to vote on a revised budget. So I had done a lot of reading and questioning in advance. And then begin to learn Robert's Rules of Order. We do have a session in this leadership training where we'll talk about that specifically. It's a little different than the state legislature because I understand they use Mason's rules and we use Robert's rules. And we also, I don't claim to be an expert. It takes a lot of training to really have that title of a qualified parliamentarian, and we've been talking about having Katie become a certified, one of the hopefully the second in the state to be a certified parliamentarian, and to help us in the continuity. Let's see here. Know your policy. Join the policy review committee. We call that, in this district, we call it our governance committee. Review your policy manual. I'm just going to briefly touch on that. We're in the process, actually, Kathleen, would you mind briefly stating what we're in the process of doing with our entire policy manual?
We're in the process. We have 2 meetings set. Everyone's invited if they would like to come on May 11th and May 12th. 8:30 to 5, Katie? I think it's 8:30 to 5. It'll be in here. There'll be breakout sessions. What we're going to do is we're going to convert to AASB policy, and then I think everyone in the state practically will be on it. Though we're ahead of Fairbanks. Fairbanks is a little behind us, so that's okay.
So we're one of the few of the 53 districts.
We're one of the few right now that have our own policy. The advantage is we're all consistent throughout the state. The other biggest advantage is it's going to save us money, because right now with every single policy change that comes from the state or from the muni, we have to completely bring lawyers in to make sure it's all valid, as well as approve it. And this way we can use AASB, and we have a cost to it, but it's much less than a lawyer looking at everything we do.
So that doesn't mean we're totally abandoning our policies, because some of ours aren't in line with ASB, but we're going to look at theirs and we're going to meld them and then add. And there's another piece, and then we'll take your question, Andy, that I would like the superintendent to respond. What we're also planning to do with when we redo these policies.
Sure. Well, board policy is generally, in general terms, overall statement, and we're looking at also articulating administrative regulation. Presently, you would find administrative regulation, or when you see a policy, what does this really mean when you hire people? What does this really mean for discipline? What does this really mean? And it usually comes in handbooks. But then those handbooks are really all over the place. So we're taking those handbooks and creating them into administrative regulation, so that when you wanted to look up dress code in a policy, you would know what it was for an employee, what it was for a student, all in one search. So we're taking the information, as the president said, that we have in policies that are in booklets or just little manuals, and placing them as regulation under the stated board policy. So that really it's a better communication tool for the public, easy accessible, because those policies are on the website somewhere, but a lot of times they're very, very, very deeply hidden under something, and it's very difficult to search them.
Yeah, I've had to search them and go, okay, this word, no, that didn't work. This word, no, that, 5 times, and then I find something that hits that policy. So this will be more easily searchable. And again, instead of you having to look through a document this thick trying to figure out, oh God, what's the policy? What's our policy on that? You'll be able to do these electronic searches, and you'll be able to have your policy with you wherever you are if you have a phone with you that has internet connection.
It's a lot more transparent.
Lots
That's
more
the thing I wanted to add between the two. And the two, you're right, the regulations are completely linked in with the policy. It's a lot more.
Andy?
I was just going to say, for anyone that hasn't been to a committee meeting, they're far less formal than the board meetings, and there's generally the opportunity for anybody to have them.
Right.
That's kind of neat.
So those policy meetings that Kathleen referred to, they aren't officially part of the academy, but you're more than welcome. All of our meetings are Open Meeting Act compliant, where we're open to the public and you can come. And it's rare that if somebody, and I don't say this in a begrudging way, someone in the peanut gallery wants to participate, we definitely bring them in. Andy knows he's been many times in the back going like this, and we've answered his questions. Because, again, community, more brains are better than one, and it helps us understand. So that's that. Did I turn it off? Is there a pause if you don't?
And the computer is over here.
Do you want to click the next one if you can do it?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So that May 11th and 12th, you think you'll go through all of your board policies and ARs and that?
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm like,
That's the first dive.
gotcha.
Right. Personal agendas. We realize that everybody has them, but they waste a lot of time. And when you're new, wait a little bit before bringing up your concerns, because oftentimes in the learning process, those things will happen, and it's being patient. The one thing I remember when I was on the board, like my first 3 weeks, and our superintendent and I went with my, okay, now I'm ready to do this, and this, and he laughed at me, not in a threatening way, but said, we are a huge ship, and we can't turn the ship on a dime. He says, but we are going to have an opportunity to address those concerns. You will find out as we move through. And if you take a ship and you just make a slight deviation, if you go miles out, that makes a huge difference in terms of what happens. But I think that's one of the hardest things myself. I know Ms. Marcette has also brought this up, is frustration that we can't make change overnight. Sometimes there's many circumstances that help us, that slow us down a little bit. That doesn't mean we can't be innovative and can't make some change, but to completely revolutionize according to whatever your agenda is doesn't usually happen overnight. Oops, back up. It's the law. It's the law. We conduct legal meetings. We follow the open meeting laws, which I'll tell you quite frankly, we are more transparent than even our state legislature that doesn't not have to necessarily follow the OMA. And so we're going to have a training later this month on the 28th with a lawyer, Dr. John Sedor, not Dr. John Sedor, and he's going to talk about some of the OMA understanding, so you understand what you can and can't do, because even if you unintentionally violate it, there are repercussions, and so we have to make sure everybody understands. We'll also be talking about our code of conduct for the board, the code of ethics for the Muni, which was just completely rewritten and passed a few weeks ago, and some of the state statutes following that you need to know for board service. Listen, be professional, listen to all issues, be aware of your district policies and strategic plans. The retreat that we have annually, we've included the first day as part of this Leadership Academy, and that's on Friday, June 2nd. And you're going to hear us evaluate our strategic plan, our Destination 2020 plan, our goals, the initiatives, the board goals and all, and you'll be hearing that discussion that day. Don't make promises that you can't keep. It takes a whole board now. And take time to learn about your job, learn about the district, be patient, enjoy your new role in the community. It'll make a difference for kids. So these are the attributes that AASB says are effective governance, that you have a standards for vision, structure, accountability, advocacy, conduct, and ethics, and we'll be touching on those as we move through. This is what school boards should know. Growth in student achievement for all children. We define that in ASD as not just academic proficiency, but a full year's growth for every kid. And would you like to clarify the difference in that for them?
Sure. We want to take a look at what's called year-to-year growth. So if a student is with us for a year, we want to guarantee at least a year. And for kids that are behind, if we want to narrow that gap, we have to work towards narrowing the gap and making up more than a year for a year. So sometimes that is different practices that we'll do. But additionally, students who are ahead, if a student is in 3rd grade but reading on a 5th grade level, they should leave 3rd grade on a 6th grade level. So it takes students where they are and moves them ahead, and we use data and now our MAP assessment to assist us with this. That our guarantee is that if you're with us for a year, you gain a year, if not catch-up growth if you were already behind. A lot of times you'll find in middle schools is where just kids flatline, so we just need to work on that, and research demonstrates that kids got a lot going on in their mind during those middle years. But what can we do in our schools for the rigor to continue to keep their brains moving the way we'd like that to happen? So, but we use data to help drive that and work with our teachers to plan for it as well.
So MAP that she mentioned, MAP, another acronym, I don't know if it's in the book because it's new, is Measures of Academic Progress. And this is something that was piloted in our middle schools, and now in the fall, no, we started last fall,
Yes,
correct me if I'm wrong, all the grade levels.
This will be the second year of middle
Yes.
schools having
Yeah.
2 year data, 2 years, and over 30 school districts in Alaska use it, so we'll have an Alaska norm, but over 30 million students nationwide use MAP. So we'll have this normative data to say, how are other kids around the nation doing as compared to Alaska, as compared to Anchorage School District, as compared to my classroom. So we can really drill down to take a look at what are the trends of moving students forward. It's called Measures of Academic Progress, given up to 3 times a year. It's really to gauge, they use what's called a Roche unit, so it's not a traditional measuring stick that we would all be familiar with. A second grader and an 8th grader can score at the same Roche unit, and that really gives you a little bit of information about their learning levels. It's not necessarily truly all content learned. It's kind of where that capability is on that rigor of what we can offer kids.
And the beauty of this test, it is done online, is if a student is excelling, it pushes them even farther. Again, would you like to speak to that?
So it's called a dynamic test. So once a student is on it the first time, they'll end with a score or a range of questions. They'll start with that same range of questions. So kids won't go all the way back. It's interesting how any test that I've administered to a child, they actually try to beat their own score because they get to know it. What we're doing though, we're moving it down to 3rd grade and eliminating some of those 3, 4, and 5, 6th grade assessments in AIMSweb that really were screeners, so really used to kind of check the kids on task, on level or not. But once a kid learns how to read, those are less valuable to actually as what are they learning. So we're scaling back so that teachers don't have more on their plates, kids don't have more on their plates, and really using the assessments that are going to help us find what next level the students are ready to learn. And that's the goal, to help create more individualized plans for kids.
And I can tell you as a former classroom teacher, on the standardized test that we'll still be required to take for statewide, our peak, which we are just finishing up this month, I never got my standardized data until the students were no longer my students. So it didn't provide me with any diagnostic tools and how I could change my curriculum or meet student needs. The MAP, which will be done, it's very short. This is not like the larger standardized testing assessments that many of you are familiar with. This is something that will be done 3 times a year and really provide, pertinent, timely information to do individualized learning plans.
Once they get going on it, an average student will be about 25 minutes. It'll assess them. If a student challenges them or something really bright, it's the brighter students that take longer because they're getting questions thrown at them that are higher. And it shuts off at an anxiety level where the kids get 50% or 48 to 52% right or wrong. So the test reads where they are, and then that's where it stops. It'll just stop for the student to not allow that frustration. And then it just gives they're 50% right or wrong in this one red area. It demonstrates these are all the things they already know. They're not going to grow if you teach them what they already know, but here's the next level that you should be focused on. So it's good feedback for teachers to assist students.
Okay. And the next item that says engage the public in a planning process that identifies the board's visions and priorities. You probably have seen many times when we are reaching out to the community with budget, with curriculum review, and then we have a number of advisory committees too that we are trying to bring community involvement in. Matt, would you like to talk about the advisory committee that you've served on for a number of years? Matt? Didn't you serve on kayak? Never?
No, never.
Oh, I thought you did. I'm wrong.
That's all right.
Star, would you like to talk about MECAC that you served on prior to your board service?
I actually served on...
And SEAC.
Yeah, I actually served on Special Education Advisory Council, MECAC, Multicultural Education Advisory Concerns Committee, and also Capital Improvement Advisory Committee, which we reviewed the buildings with the highest need for renovations or repairs, that sort of thing, and then made the recommendation to the board for the school bonds. I felt being a good school board member meant that I really needed to know more about the school district. I know several people probably don't feel that, but coming into it, I felt that I needed to know what were the needs of our school, what were the things we needed to work in or work on, so that I could be able to jump right in and not have that learning curve. So it was important to me, not only for that perspective, but also as a community member, also as a having a student and a grandchild in ASD, knowing that not only my students but other students were getting the services they needed, so that I could advocate for them.
So, and we do have a training, I believe it's towards the end of May, where you're going to learn what I call the alphabet soup, and you'll understand more in depth about these different advisory committees and how we engage the public. I also have some ideas on ways as board members that we can expand our participation in the community to draw more of the community, and particularly in those areas, those student groups where we have less representation and where our academic achievement gaps are broadest. So you'll be hearing more about that. Provide a safe and welcoming school environment. That's one of our Destination 2020 goals, which you'll hear about more later. Establish policies and resources for effective instruction and student learning. Develop sound operation policies and apply consistently. It's not working for me still. Okay. So vision, unusual capability in discernment or perception is the definition of a vision. A mental image created by the imagination. On a board, we create a shared vision for to enhance student achievement. That doesn't mean that all board members are as enthusiastic about every piece of the shared vision, but that's probably something that we do differently than other elected officials, as we really try as a board to come to a shared consensus in what our vision is for our students. And many times in our discussions and our votes, we also try to come to some type of a shared vision. It doesn't always happen, but you'll see that. I know some people, when they look at the board meetings and they see the board voting 7-0, and they're like, what, did they even read it, or they're not having any arguments. Many times the discussions and things have happened prior in committee assignments and in our work session in particular. And so if you're just watching the regular board meeting, where it's the second time it's appeared on the agenda, you may see things pass that have already had a lot of public discussion about. So, but that's part of an effective board. Structure, the manner in which parts are arranged or combined to form a whole, interrelation of parts in a complete entity. So the board provides the structure that supports the vision. And that is something, if you've observed school board meetings in years prior to this last year, you may have noticed we've done a lot of tweaking of our structure in an attempt to try to be, to better support our vision. Accountability, the board measures district performance towards accomplishing the vision and reports and results to the public. Again, we've done a lot of changes in this past year. If you haven't seen the data dashboard, you'll be getting to know that better in a future training, to really put our data out there for the public to see. The metaphor I use is that it's a flashlight, not a hammer. If you don't measure, or what's the term you use? You measure what you treasure.
You treasure what you measure.
You treasure what you measure, right?
If you care about it,
yeah, and so we need to understand where our strengths and weaknesses are, and then we need to work to improve those. Here's a direct example. I set up through the data dashboard a alert that I get every Monday morning that talks about where we are as a district in terms of our attendance goal. And I've communicated with the superintendent because, quite frankly, this year we seem to have had a big drop over the last 3 years that we've tracked it, and it's starting to come back. But I'm really concerned because what does that tell me? That tells me we need to dig a little deeper. Maybe when we have our next calendar committee that determines our calendars for 3 years, we maybe need to look back. What was the attendance in that week prior to Christmas? What was the attendance in the week prior to Thanksgiving? Because a lot of those things can impact. Where did the flu have a big impact on our attendance? When do PFDs come in? How does that impact her? So it informs some of the discussion, and it shines a light like, we maybe need to investigate that further. It may have nothing to do with the calendar. It may have to do with other factors, but that information can help in that realm. Advocacy, the board champions our vision And again, the board is asked to go out into the community and do a lot of advocacy. Kathleen, I'm sorry, your mouth is full. Maybe I'll go to her and then I'll come back to you.
Oh.
What are some of the, in terms of community councils, can you give a real short example of what we do with a community council?
While I go to university, the University Community Council, they just like to hear from us, know that we're there. We talk about the good things we're doing, like when we came out with the data dashboard, I talked about that. I talked about the bonds and what it meant to them at public. They ask questions about the budget. They ask about the new English language or the language program that we're putting out there. So it's nice. I mean, they like to have their assembly members and their legislators, but they like to have their school board members too, because a lot of us were meeting in the schools to begin with. So it's very important, I think, to have that connection with the community.
So every board member is assigned a certain number of community councils that we work with. Yes, ma'am.
Who's assigned my community council?
What is yours?
Sam Lake. I
Cameron.
would love.
Cameron Presbyterian.
I remember James came.
And I'm going to talk about accountability a little later, so that's important. Kathleen, would you like to talk not only about community councils, some of the other things where the board has a public presence?
So I attend community councils not only to provide an update, but more importantly for me is to listen. What are the issues within the community? I have the South area this year, and before I ever started doing it, I talked, you're my grant. Brett and I communicate quite often, and if I can't come, I let him know and pass information on. But I got a tour of the South area because there's some special situations with the South area that you don't have as an East Sider that I don't have to worry about, from drainage to hillsides to parks, etc. But the other thing that I've been doing is I've been going to them, and I'm missing Matt's because I'm MC of concert, which is my favorite thing to do.
As a board
Is
member,
I've been thanking all of the community, of the people in the community for passing the bonds and about just how important that was, because it's key. And the nice thing is we have our legislators usually call into the meetings. We have assembly members and school boards. So it also gives you a very well-rounded of all types of different governing bodies, as well as listening to the community.
Okay, thank you. So I think you know that when you're elected, it's a little confusing because they have the letters for the school board seats, but that's irrelevant to where you live in Anchorage. All school board members represent all of the community, but that's a pretty big ticket. So what we do is split the Anchorage School District into 7 areas. And you do an area for 1 year, and then you switch, and then you switch, and then you switch. So you have an opportunity. It'll take you 7 years on the term, to get all the areas. But I think it's important because you get a different perspective. This year, I've been doing Chugach Eagle River, and even though I live in Midtown, I've been doing the drive. I have a lot more respect for all those nixels I get about things happening on the Glen Highway because I've been living a few of them. But it has given me another perspective, and I think that's important in terms of your ability, informing your ability to really represent all the district and all schools. Mm-hmm.
How often does that change? You said it
Every year.
Okay,
Mhm.
so that's 7 years
And
cycle.
today at 4 p.m. when we do our reorganization, we'll be determining who has what areas. And of course, there are some people that get really attached to a certain area and they want to stay in that area. But we, as a board, encourage people, if you've never done an area, it's time to do that. Yeah.
Another thing to note is, and especially with Sand Lake, it's the same night as
Yeah, it is.
the board meeting.
Yes.
Monday.
So that's the other issue that you have with Sand Lake as well. And
It's
not the
similar
only
with
one.
Rogers Park Community Council.
Yeah, Girdwood Board of Supervisors is absolutely the same. I had to go, I can't go, I have to.
But we do have other things that the board represents, the Federation of Community Councils, and so that's an opportunity for someone to go and present for all of those if a board member hasn't been able to make it to a meeting, kind of an overview, and a number of other organizations, which we'll talk about later. Last but not least, ethics, conduct and ethics, the way the person acts, a principle of right or good behavior. I mentioned that we redid our code of conduct for the board, and that we will be doing specific training on that, as I mentioned, on April 28th. So it's a way of life for board members. So I want to flip now to the actual ASD webpage, and I want to show you how we access board docs. Now granted, is this the version that you would get if you were a board member, or is this a version for the public? This is the version if you're a board member, correct?
Right, and but you can see where the public and the employees sign in pages, so
Yeah.
this is the main page.
Now, I'm one of these strange people that needs glasses for distance. I have to take them off to read. So I put that on. So if you go to the ASD webpage, you're controlling it now, right? We would go to school board first, not employees, over there, school board, and you click on school board. Okay, you see this lovely homepage that talks about meetings, calendar, and a bunch of other links, but the most important on this page is board docs. And normally there's a public access button only if you're the public, but if you're a board member, you have employee access, and this is where your username and your password goes in. Many of us have this bookmarked and it's automatic. I just have to click it and it already has my password saved. So to get into board docs is quite simple, and it takes you into this document. So you see over on the far left, the second tab in at the top is meetings, okay? When you're preparing for a meeting, this is where you would go to find the agenda and to find all of the memos or the attachments that are necessary to prepare for the meeting. So I'm going to start with, yeah, that's right, the meeting that's coming up next Monday. So we always start with a work session, and that starts at 4 p.m. and runs for approximately 2 hours. The work session is televised, it's filmed, and you can either live stream it or you can go through the Muni channel and you can watch the work session. And that's actually a lot of meat. That's when the sausage making happens. That's when we're learning about things and really getting in more heavy duty in terms of understanding what it is that we're going to be called upon to vote, or just understanding some aspect of the district that informs our decision making. And we always have a number of topics. This one I just want to focus on for a minute, the board topic tracking results. As the president and the vice president who assist me with the superintendent, when we set the agenda, we had made a decision on our retreat last year that a certain amount of our time would be spent on student achievement, on operations, and help me with the third one, guys. Just spacing it right now. Supplemental information. And so our time was more balanced because we had we had our consciousness raised that we were spending a lot of time on operations and less time on student achievement, and we wanted to change that around. So we actually track it, our board secretary tracks it, and we analyze it every once in a while and say, well, we're taking that off work session, we're going to do more in this realm because we need to balance our responsibilities. So we have a report on that coming up next week. So you can see the different topics that are going to be covered in the work session next Monday. Number 6, at around 5:30 of every work session is when we have a focus on students and staff. And this is again an opportunity for us to acknowledge and celebrate our staff and our students. And there's always more individuals that we would like to acknowledge than we have time for, but we usually take about 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Occasionally there'll be a community group that has a presentation that they would like us to consider. It's more than a 3-minute testimony type agenda, and we've brought those in. For instance, ARISE, which is the Cook Inlet Tribal Council's a collective impact group that's working on raising achievement for our Alaska Native students. They've come and done presentations. 90% by 2020, which is another collective impact group that United Way supports as the backbone agency for. They've come and done presentations. But then we also have staff members and students who are recognized for their exemplary performance at that time too.
So can I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
insert something? Work sessions are nice because, you can't say anything as part of the gallery, which always killed me when I went to those. But it gives you that opportunity to pose what you want to say at the board meeting when you can testify.
Or I've heard people at the work session then send me a note or call me on the phone afterwards and say, I'd like to talk with you about this topic that you discussed. So it again, raises your awareness of the issues that we're discussing. We usually adjourn the work session and then we do executive session. That's where we're handling confidential issues that deal with personnel or students or labor contract negotiations. And that's normally next door in 150. We have the discussions there, staff member give us more information. Then we bring those items back to the meeting to actually vote on, but you won't hear students' names or even initials, you'll hear case numbers because of the FERPA laws and student confidentiality. We also, during our meetings, if people have issues with personnel, we don't take testimony on somebody's dissatisfaction or even satisfaction on a personnel matter. There is a procedure for handling that in the Anchorage School District that's set forth in our policy. Then after the executive session, and by the way, we usually are multitasking. That's usually when we eat dinner. All school, and by the way, we are not fed at taxpayer expense. All board members have a certain amount deducted from their stipend check to cover our meals, and we have catering, and our brilliant school board secretary has worked it out, and many times we are using the services of our students in the ProStart programs, the culinary arts, career and technical education programs, and they're bringing in the food, they're catering, and they're getting the experience of serving, and we eat quite well. You can tell. So that's normally the executive session. Then we move into the regular session starting at 7 p.m. And there is a series of things that we do. Next Monday is special because we'll be adjourning the 2016-17 school board. It's a sine die. And then we will be, this is the one time when the superintendent gets to be the presider of the meeting. She takes over during the election of officers, and then whoever is elected as a new president then takes the seat back, and our superintendent moves back to her seat. So we have public testimony. We start with non-agenda or non-action item public testimony. And again, if many of you have been here at meetings, I think you see we normally give people 3 minutes to testify. And sometimes if it's 2 people that come up, then they each get 3 minutes. Then we move from public testimony on non-agenda, non-action items into our superintendent update. And those can vary dramatically on the topics that our superintendent wants to give feedback to the board on. This is in addition to the weekly board connect that our superintendent sends out to all the board members and her cabinet, the chiefs, to inform us on various issues either that people have contacted us on or that are happening. So we have a lot of communication. Often in the updates, though, she'll also be giving information that we want the community to also have access to. And then we have our student advisory board representative report. I think some of you have seen that was a change we did this year, where rather than having our student advisory board member in the audience, we have them seated up right next to our school board secretary, and they do the report. They also give advisory votes on everything that we vote on. They study the agenda and all those memos in advance too, so they do quite a bit of reading. It's ready for college. We then go to board committee reports, and if a board member has been to a conference, some type of a report on what they learned and what the takeaways were from the conferences that they attended, their professional development. I'll stop for a minute to take questions before I move on. Okay, and if in the process you want to raise your hand, go for it. Then we move to our consent agenda, and these are often personnel reports or meeting minutes, and usually passed without a lot of discussion. And then we go to our action items. And again, we take public testimony before each and every action item. People, they can either sign up or they can decide right in the moment, raise their hand, and I would call them forward to do testimony. We close public discussion, and then we open it up for board discussion. We close board discussion, then we go for our student advisory vote, and then we do our official vote. And the voting is done online, so every meeting when you come, Your laptop that you have up front, you have it opened up because you're voting, you'll be clicking a yay or a nay button on the screen. Does it actually say nay or does it say no?
Nay.
Nay, okay. And these screens that you see here, these are so that you don't have to strain looking at the screens on the side. You have the same information in front of you for any of the presentations being done. We then move to all the different, through all the different memos until we get to non-action items again. These are items, most items will show up on an agenda first under non-action, and then 2 weeks later under action. And sometimes there's been an amendment. Maybe it's changed. There's been discussion and there's changes made. Sometimes it's the exact same memo, and sometimes it shows up on the one meeting and 2 weeks later it's not there. It's been postponed for whatever reason for a later date. Okay? Then we get to the opportunity, future items, future business. If a board member has an item that they would like put on the agenda, this is where they can bring it up. And if a second board member also is interested in that being put on the agenda, I will put it under consideration for agenda posting. You can also, as a board member, you can submit things to me in writing at any time saying this is something I would like to have considered for the agenda. It's written in policy that way. Then we move to school board and administration comments and communications. I always call this the bowling pulpit time, where we get to talk about things that we've done in the community, kudos, or it's rare, but sometimes you could bring up concerns that have come in the community, but things that we've seen and an announcement that we want to make about items of interest for our public.
So I was just curious, you said that people can also, other board members can submit things in writing to you. So how does that tie into the Open Meeting Act?
They can only send it to me. They can't send it to all the board members.
Okay, and then you have to publish it for the other board members to see.
I would probably bring it up at the next meeting and say, I had a board member submit that they would like to have this as an agenda item. Do I have a second board member who also is interested in the same topic? If I get acquiescence, there's a second, then it will go back to a planning meeting. If they don't, then not. And we're very careful on the Open Meetings Act, so thank you for the question, Dina. There are, in addition to what the superintendent sends out, I send out at least 2 times, if not 3 times a month, updates from the PRES, I call it. And it has information that I want to make sure all of my board members have access to, so that I'm not, telling Star and then forgetting to tell Kathleen. And that is legal under OMA as long as they don't respond to me and then you start these back and forth email discussions about what's happening. And because of that, I give my update to our school board secretary, and she's going to show you now where that is. Sorry. On the agenda, on the thing. So that's basically we adjourn, and so that's under meetings. And I want to go to the library for a minute because this is a treasure chest when you're on the board and you have access to this. Unfortunately, the general public doesn't necessarily have access. Some of the things that are on here, I'm giving you, though, in this Leadership Academy. So you see archive committee meetings. So it has information on the agendas, and if there was any minutes, though there tend to be less formal, where there's usually an audio recording but not written minutes, but about what's happening on different committees. Then board memos. This is about the memo. It's not actual memos. It's the agenda process, the memo style guidelines, the memo timeline and due date, and submitting memos and board docs. It's rare that that's something that you're going to do unless you're a committee chair and your committee is going to put forth a memo recommendation to the board. In that case, and when I was communications or policy committee chair, I often had to draft a memo. And of course, administration, and Katie is invaluable in helping you guide that along. She knows this very well. Then we go to board orientation. These are items that you'll be learning more about, that we've developed for board development, board leadership, and what every board member needs to know. That's a document you'll be seeing in the future. We're going to take you through a lot of details and information about the Anchorage School District that would help you. It's all in one concise document, and it helps you have in your fingertips a lot of the details that you can't commit to memory. So, board portal. This is where we list things on the board projects, items. Maybe they're sitting in our parking lot for future consideration. Maybe they're ideas that board members would like to have pursued in the future. So it's kind of our parking lot area. The document I gave you today, serving on the Anchorage School Board. A timeline document. Could you open that up for a minute so they can see what that is? Third one, This basically talks about how we set up the meetings. How many will you be interested in having this? This is something I can email to you. Okay, some of these documents I will be sending to you, but this is what I was referring to earlier, the 3 categories: monitoring information, decision-making information, and supplemental information, where we actually keep track down to 5 minutes increments if we are evenly sharing our time on these things. So that's kind of the guideline that I use in setting our agendas. You can go back. The Council of Great City Schools, the key performance indicators. These have to do with reports that we have asked the Council of Great City Schools, of which we are a member, to prepare for the district. And this is an archive of all those different reports. Here's one on managing. They all say managing for results, but it has to do with our what we call key performance indicators. So that's a lovely archive of those reports. School board history. If you're ever interested, this goes all the way back, I think, to 1915 in terms of who's done school board service. It's very interesting. You'll see a who's who of a lot of Anchorage names in there. There you go. And by the way, outside the front door, there's a glass screen that lists not all since 1915, but a lot of names. I don't think they're all from 1915 up there. Maybe I should check. Yeah. I think Z.J. Lusac was a school board member before he had a library named after him, before he was on mayor. The ASD IT Help Desk and Maintenance Guide. If you're ever having issues with your laptop or your access to board docs or your email and stuff, though I will have to tell you that they treat us with kid gloves here, and when I have a problem I call Katie because I'm lazy and I don't go try to figure it out myself, and she normally troubleshoots with our IT folks, who you'll meet in just a moment.
Madam President, it goes back to 1915.
It does on the board out there? Yeah. Okay, then we have board travel. Can you click on, or the board planning calendar, I think I already talked about. Board travel, we keep track of who's traveled where and how much money we've spent. One of my jobs as president is to make sure there's equitable distribution of the limited resources we have for professional development as board members. Up till now, we've allowed board members to attend either the Council of Great City Schools annual conference, national, or the National School Board Association annual conference. Fortunately for us, the Alaska Association of School Board Conference is in Anchorage, and so that allows us, we still have to pay the fee for the conference, but we don't have to pay any travel expenses. And then board members who are interested in working on our legislative agenda and going to Juneau, they're also allowed to go to one of the AASB fly-ins or at separate time when we go and talk and meet with legislators. So I keep track of that to make sure it's fair and equitable, and we also, Kathleen and I are kind of penny pinchers when it comes to this. We have this running agenda to try to do 2 for 1, so we have used companion fare tickets, we share hotel rooms. They haven't been able to give us 1 badge, but we're trying to save money all the time to make it go farther, so that, because occasionally there are other conferences and if we don't have the money, and we did cut our budget last year by 25%, so I'm really watching our pennies in terms of trying to get the professional development for board members, but be equitable at the same time. And then we go to training and informational links. I'm not going to go down there, but that doesn't have much underneath it anyway. Board Connect. This is, just so you know, this is where we archive all of the superintendents' board connects. And for our new board members, I know you don't have a lot to read at night, so maybe you want to take that's really bad form to take your laptop to bed, but or your phone. You can go back and read some of these old connects if you're interested in the history of a lot of the things that the superintendent has communicated to us this year. Board updates for 2016. Again, these are my updates to board members. Then we go to committees. Again, these are the archiving again of all the different committees, as well as the school and facility assignments that are there. So who's responsible for what, okay? So if you've forgotten, you can always go and find this. I think Katie got frustrated by sending that out about 17 million times a school year when board members said, am I responsible for that? She goes, it's linked. Go to board docs, it's linked, it's linked. Conference reports, the next item here. Again, these are some of the actual handouts given at conferences. Not every session gives you a handout, but if it's particularly valuable, board members send those into Katie and she links them for access for all board members. And there's ASB, then district news. Does that link work? This is something that you'll get a link to every Friday when Katie sends out my update. And it's a link to the part of the website where our communications department keeps the news media informed on things that are coming up in the schools, because they're always looking for news stories. And so they can go right there and find out this is happening there, this is happening there. I go to that every week and look at it. And as my schedule allows, I'll add things on that I want to go check out things happening in various schools or in the administration building. And last but not least, legislative information. We keep track of the legislators by the different schools. Oops, is that it?
It is, yeah, it's hard to read.
Yeah, that's hard to read. You have to have it up close. If we've made contact with different legislators, either through a phone call or an email or a visit or a letter, and we kind of keep track of that so that we are truly doing our job of keeping all of our legislators informed. And so that's board docs. There's a lot in there, and you can spend a lot of time playing with it and following and tracking information. And again, that's an overview for many of you. You don't have access to all of that. As a public member, you do have access to the agenda and the memos that aren't confidential memos, personnel and student hearings and all. So, any questions on that? Okay, time to stand up, stretch, and I'm going to have Dr. Bishop come up as you're standing up and stretching and tell you what this speed dating is going to be like.
All right, well, I'm going to, in the midst of this, after about 10 minutes, there's going to be 5-minute breaks all along, so then you could go to the restroom and get more food or whatever. There'll be lots of time now, but I'm Dina Bishop, and you can sit down now if you like. If not, you can stand. I just wanted to share, the president asked me to introduce you to a little bit of the administration. And I thought to couch that information is to see ASD in a big picture. And some of the data that we pulled is to share with you. And she called me up and I didn't have a cheat sheet. So this is ASD. And the reason that the data, who's running this?
I am.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay. Soon as you get that, it's sticky. Is to just give an idea about how big we are. So as a board member of 7, you're a board member of a $1 billion industry. There are not very many of those in Alaska, and there are not very many of those nationwide. In fact, less than 2% of businesses can actually say they have a budget in the billions of dollars. To put that into perspective, I'm going to give you the data about who we are. So our operating budget is $600 million. We have $2 billion in assets in capital. So the building replacement cost is over $2 billion. Running those and all of that in the operations is $600 million. So that's quite a large budget for any business, if you want to talk about the business side. Board members are responsible. Of course, education of it in itself is that educational side of the house, but you run it with funds. And I like to say they're other people's funds. It's other people's money supporting students in Anchorage to meet their educational dreams. 79% of all funds are instruction and 21% are non-instruction. And these are regulated by a chart of accounts at the state level. So they determine the chart of accounts. It's audited every year. Every year ASD goes through an audit. 90% of all of our funds, however, go to people, whether that's teachers or aides or custodians or lunch workers or bus folks or district people. 90%, we are in the human resource business. It is people who educate children and people who support schools to educate children. And we say that what happens in the school, I use a term when I talk to principals, is the Gemba, and it means where the value's added. It's a Japanese term, and our Gemba are at schools. And so that's where value's added. That is where the buck stops, kind of, where we need to keep our focus for what happens in schools, and everything supports what happens with students. You might hear a lot about administration, and administration costs so much. By your chart of accounts, administration is less than 5% in the district. It's 4.7% presently. We sustain the, yes?
We're going to have a session that actually goes into the budget details.
Absolutely.
So I don't hold my
Yep. And about how the metric for the budget, where it all goes. So when you look at instruction, that would be teachers, special education teachers, aides and tutors. Anyone that support, principals that support students. People that don't support students directly and do the business side of the house, like count money, they wouldn't be instruction. So it's very defined in a chart of accounts at the state level. We have the single largest K-12 physical plant in the state. We have the most buildings. The only function publicly larger than us is the university system with over 300 different buildings. So we're quite large. 93 billions, 86 of those are schools. I already talked about the replacement value and almost 8 million square feet to take care of. And that's why we see bonds on our ballots a lot. This last bond, the board struggled. We did have some investing in renovations of some of our old buildings. That was taken off to ensure that whatever we bonded for, we would have debt paid off to not increase taxes was the goal. So you found roofs on there, HVAC system, heating, ventilation, as well as fixing up Wilmington West after the earthquake. So they were very minimal. The group that Star Marset is on with the capital improvement, in fact, that group came to the district and wanted those school renovations placed on there. They did not want to take them off, and it went through the public process of several board meetings to get that down to the budget where it was. But the committee, made up of individual architects and community members, said we want this, and it really vacillated back and forth. So it was I thought a very public way to determine what should be on the bond, and in a very fair way. In addition to those data, 24,000 students ride a bus every day. Our full-time equivalents, or FTE, in our school district is about 48,000. However, more closer to 49,000 come through our doors every day because FTE is full-time equivalent. So if you have a half-time student, 2 half-time students, although there's 2 bodies, they would only count for 1 in funding. Any preschool child is counted outside the full-time equivalent, except for special education, and so then you can't count them. Our other preschools aren't counted in our ADM. So we have about 49,000 bodies come out through our door, but you'll see a little over 48,000 in FTE. So we have quite a big busing business with 230 distinct separate routes that go through our city. And we make 30 million meals a year for students. So from nutrition services that follow federal regulation to busing that follows state and federal rules to actually educating students. And that is on both the state and federal as well as local policy. All of the system, this
this big industry we talk about actually funnels through all these rules and regulations to get to the final product. And a lot of us experience public school, so we have a mind's eye of the user part of it, but some of us don't have an experience on the producer part of it, like the part of that big system. So it's very exciting. I love my job. It's a great job to have. And I work with a wonderful team. And my part is to introduce you to that team. So the ASD organizational chart, I am, along with Katie, although I'm not Katie's boss, we both answer to the board. I am the board's employee. I get that the board collectively is my boss. When the board sets direction, they charge me and say, this is what we want you to do. And these are, the outcomes that we want you to get. And boards make that decision. And a job of a superintendent is not something, I say that I'm here to do a job, not to just have a job. And a little bit about myself, this is my 26th year in education in Alaska. I've been in Copper River School District, which is small. If you've ever been out catching kings out there or anything, you might know Glen Allen area. And then I was in Mat-Su-Boro School District, which is just right up the road, with lots of partnerships already with Anchorage. And then I moved here in August, and so and I love it. It's really wonderful. With that, I'm going to announce, so I work for the board. Well, the citizens elect the board gets that, and just like every 3 years the board can be replaced, I'm on a 3-year contract too. So if the board collectively does not vote to keep a superintendent, then there's a new superintendent, and that's the way it works. That's the business that we're in. There isn't this any kind of a protection necessarily. You are answering to your board. You're their employee. So with the school board, we talked about just some of the other parts of the school board, the secretary, the student liaison. But to the superintendent, there are Heidi Embley is our communications. She actually works for the superintendent and the board to communicate about ASD. So whether that's the great stories that we have, whether that's the emergencies we have, whether that's moving through the budget times, the communications department is run through Heidi Embley, and she works for both me and the board collectively. Really, we work to put the district news out. Kathy Moffitt is outside of this, and Kathy is a special programs director. And so Kathy works in our office with Katie and my secretary, Janet Hayes. And she just assists with projects such as this, such as putting the budget together. She's kind of assists with really the right-hand person that is needed to just kind of take care of the details. And then Janet, of course, works with me and with me on a team, which they were renamed, I think, a couple years ago, Chiefs, according to the Council of Great City Schools, which is a council made up of the largest 100 school districts in the United States. And I believe when I last read, we were 86th largest, the 86th largest in the entire nation for size of a school district. So we are a big shop. The mean size of a school district in the United States, the majority, over 50%, almost 60% of school districts in the United States are 6,000 students or under. So we're a mega district compared to the majority of school districts in the United States. So the Council of Great City Schools, the way that we had organized, they had suggested that to use a chief of different areas and constructs in the system so that we have kind of an understanding of responsibilities. And I would like to introduce you to them, and that's the part of the speed dating that the president talked about. You don't have to date anyone, but you're just going to go to a table, and they're going to talk about the bigger sense of what the job is. So when we talk about technology, they're going to give a bigger sense of this is what we do with technology. It's not only running the business side, it's for education too. This is how many computers, systems, servers we have in the system. When we talk to maintenance and operations, he'll talk about the busing and the custodian and this and that. So, and he also has nutrition services. So I'm going to introduce them to you. They're going to stand up, and then we'll have a 5-minute break, and then you'll go to a table And you'll just be at that table, and they're just going to chat and talk to you a little bit about some of the people on their team. But it's very informal. There's no presentation. It's just a meet and greet. We are wearing all of our name tags too. One of the things that every time principals come, we have over 300 district leaderships, from student nutrition to being a leader in a school. And the biggest sign of respect to human beings is that you know their name. And so we want to use your name, and we hope that you just call us by our name as well, and get to know us during your time in the academy. With that, you'll talk for about 5 minutes, and then there'll be a 5-minute break, and then we'll switch tables. If there are probably about 2 people at each table, would probably do it. So I'll start, I'm going to be at the first table, and I'm the superintendent, and Kathy Moffett will be with me just to talk about communications with superintendents. And then table number 2 is Mr. Chief Graham of Academic Services, Michael Graham. And table number 3 is our Chief Financial Officer, Jim Anderson, and he has some folks from his team, I think, or Heidi's going to share. Number 4 is our chief. This is not Todd Hess, but Todd Hess was at work today but left ill. So I requested that he send his executive director, Susan Schmidt, to represent his table for HR, which is human resources, of course. We have a chief of information and technology, Mr. Fleckenstein. So he's here as well. And then we also have our chief Operations. Yes, and I would call him our chief business officer, and I got confused, and he finally one day, after about 6 months, said, I'm really the chief of operations, not the chief of business. It's business operations. So he's our chief of operations, and that is Mr. Tom Ross.
So very quickly, in case you guys don't, do you know where the bathrooms are? Okay. Directly across the hall, it says restroom right across the top.
And so they're going to have 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes to move to the new table or take a break or get food or just talk to somebody. We wanted it to be informal because that's how we get to know each other and create relationships so that we can do a better job. When we're done this, there'll be a short 10-minute tour just to kind of show you around the building. And then when we come back here, we're just going to take any needs that you might have in order that if you had some information that you'd like, so that our president and making the future sessions would actually meet your needs, so that we can help you learn more about ASU and the role as a board member. So with that, let's take a 5-minute break, and then when you come back, it's 20 after, so at 25 after, 2 people at each one of those tables, and then we'll just roll.
And you'll see on the screen, it actually has a countdown.
So this is the break countdown. There you go.
Do you mind putting the chart back up so that when we're meeting with people, we can put it in context?